I know, like, even with Relic coming out, that there's going to be some backlash because it's not that type of, scare by numbers kind of film. And I'm kind of like mentally prepared myself for that.
Welcome to the Film Riot podcast. I'm Ryan Conley, and today on the show we have Natalie Erika James. Natalie is the co-writer and director of the new film Relic, which if you have not seen it, definitely go watch that right away in any of the places that you stream your film to rent or watch. It is out right now and 100% worth your time. I said it online before, and it's just true. This is one of, if not my favorite horror film since Hereditary. And I love this film for all the reasons that I loved Hereditary so much, and that is because it really focuses on character and story and theme. It's less concerned about giving you jump scares than it is about delivering a really excellent story, which is what all great horror films do. And this is a really ballsy film too. Natalie made some really brave choices that I really appreciate and love about the film. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have not seen it, again, go and do that. But this was also Natalie's first feature film, so she talks a little bit about that. She talks about writing the film, working with a collaborator. She talks a bit about what she has coming next, and she was really open and honest about all of it. But before we do that, I do want to thank our sponsor, which today's sponsor is mixkit.co. This is a free resource that every editor and video creator should be using right now. Mixkit has free stock videos and free stock music, plus free Premiere Pro templates. The great thing about it is the free assets on Mixkit don't suck. They're high quality and have a great range for you to choose from. So you have video clips for your next project, whether it be for B-roll or even if you just want to practice editing. This is a great way to just grab assets and make maybe a fake trailer just to refine your skills. You can download as many videos as you need across their range that includes city videos, drone footage, stunning nature clips, and a bunch more. And for Adobe Premiere users, you can get Premiere Pro templates that are customizable Mogurt or project files. So you don't even need to sign up. You just download the clips, music, and Premiere Pro templates from mixkit.co and start using them. This is a real thing that exists right now, and it's quality stuff. So definitely jump over there and check that out. It is really a great resource for filmmakers. And you can also go to filmriot.com/podcast, find the episode page for this episode, and we have links for you in there as well. But now with that out of the way, I'm going to shut up and get into it with Natalie. So just to start out where I always start out, do you remember the moment when you realized that this is what you wanted to do? You wanted to be a filmmaker?
Ooh, yes, I guess I always had an interest in film, and in my teens, I'd done a few filmmaking courses and made these really, pretentious little art films. But it wasn't really until high school, I would say, like late high school, that I kind of saw it as a career path. So I think I always had the interest, but I, for whatever reason, kind of didn't see it as a viable career path. And then when I was doing kind of probably year 11 or 12, my art teacher really encouraged me to apply to some film schools. And, still I was like kind of playing it, cautiously, because I applied to one film school in Melbourne, which was like my dream school. And then below that, I kind of just had law, all these like law degrees. So thank God I made it in, because I don't know, I guess it sounds really fatalistic now, but I guess at the time I was thinking, if I'm not good enough for this one school, then, I'm just not good enough to be a filmmaker, which is
right.
A bit less, but yeah.
Was there like a specific movie or anything that you remember that kind of like really resonated with you, that kind of made you think that storytelling was a path for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three films that made me really want to become a filmmaker were probably Trainspotting, Danny Boyle's, Mulholland Drive, David Lynch, and I think 2001. But that came later. Like, I think, what really got me interested in the craft of it was probably Lord of the Rings and those incredible, like, box set DVDs that Peter Jackson made, all the behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm. He was like one of the first ones to really do that and kind of let you behind the scenes of everything. I loved that completely. So much. He did it with King Kong too. Remember that one? And they tried to like put it out online first, which it was.
Oh, did they? I didn't realize they did that. Oh.
Yeah, you were able to watch like behind the scenes on stuff before the film even came out. And then when the film came out, I actually have it on I'm looking at it on my bookcase right now. It's like this big box set for King King Kong as well, where they go into like every department and job. It's really fantastic.
Well, yeah, and I loved, obviously the craft of it was so interesting, but also the camaraderie of everyone on set. I think I was just really drawn to that culture, I suppose. So, yeah, I think looking back, I was probably like 11 when Lord of the Rings came out. So sometime in my preteen to 13 years of age.
That's awesome. Mine is Jurassic Park, and I was actually 11 when Jurassic Park came out.
Oh, no way!
Yeah, there's something about that age apparently.
The formative years.
Yeah, totally. And it definitely resonates with me that you saying like 2001 came later. It kind of just got me thinking about the fact that there's like these films that I grew up with, but it was later on in life when I revisited some classics that really informed a lot of what makes me later in life, which is also kind of interesting. But what was your first like breakthrough moment? That moment where you felt like you were now stepping on the path to actually do this, like your first break into, professional work or just the industry in general?
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I went to film school like straight off the back of finishing high school. So I suppose starting that, as I said, it was my dream school, and the first 6 months I felt like I was just in this surreal kind of, dream state the whole time. So yeah, I was really ecstatic to be there. Just trying to think. I guess even in high school, in art, I would use film as a medium and make short films. And I guess it was a way to, because I always had really strong ideas and concepts, but just wasn't very like technically gifted, I suppose, in other mediums. So film was this kind of perfect way to express myself without the technical, painting and drawing skills. And probably like the first taste of that was like they had this, I went to international school in Shanghai, and they had this kind of, mini film festival for all the international school students. And my film won an award, which is like the first taste of feeling like, oh, wow, like maybe I can do this. It's on such a small scale.
Right. But, a little bit of that validation.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And it's weird because I don't, awards don't seem like massively important to me now. But I think back then it was just nice to, I guess when you're in that budding state where you're, there's so many kind of life decisions ahead of you, it just felt like a kind of a point to that path. So,
Yeah. And then after film school, what was like your first gig?
I worked as a PA at a production company in Melbourne, and I did that for a while. I think I was doing that in my third year of film school as well. And that was really interesting, and they mostly made documentaries, I would say, maybe like a few narratives. And it was a pretty small, like indie Melbourne company. So they weren't doing like huge projects, but it still gave me a great insight into the production side of things. And then from there, I started just working in ads, essentially. So PAing, production coordinating, doing all the production side of things, but also directors assisting too. And then I kind of slowly made it into directing from there. So yeah, I've always had that, I guess, just to pay rent, the commercial element, and anything from, content videos to kind of higher end ads.
Sure. We've all been there, those talking head videos that are just like soul sucking.
Absolutely. But I do feel like, that was really valuable, and it also allowed me to, I guess, cultivate a lifestyle in which you can just, fuck off and do like a short film whenever you feel like it.
Yeah.
Because I think, I've never really had like a full-time job my entire life. And that's kind of just I feel like a necessity of having the freedom and the time to make your own stuff, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were on Upgrade, right? But I think I heard in another interview that it was something where you got to shadow Lee Winnell.
Yeah, that's right. So the state government here, they have these programs where they call them directors' attachments. And yeah, essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like. You attach yourself to a director and follow them around for about 3 months. And so, yeah, I got to do it with Lee on Upgrade, which is incredible. I feel like it's such an amazing insight. It is a slog as well. Like you have to, you're not doing anything on set for 3 months, essentially. There's a bit of stuff to do. There's a bit of stuff to do in pre-production. You can kind of help out but really you are just there to observe. And
so it's like lots of coffee drinking, I imagine.
Right. Yeah, especially with the night shoots. And but it really was like the perfect set to do it on, because there were so many incredible kind of genre elements to that film. You know, all the prosthetics and the massive sets that were built and the VFX and all things that, you know, I already had Relic in the works when I did that attachment. So it was really kind of directly useful for me to observe all of it. And a lot of the crew that were used on Upgrade, we ended up using on Relic as well. I would say like the stunt coordinator, the VFX, not the VFX, the prosthetics. So that was awesome to just like already have that relationship.
Was there anything that you remember specifically that was like a big, I mean, I imagine there was an insane amount to learn from that experience, but was there anything that was extremely informative, or a couple of things that you then took into Relic?
I would say it wasn't so much the hard skills on set that I was learning. It was more the scope of a feature and the expectations that are placed on a director, and the kind of, I guess, just watching firsthand how much of a marathon it can be. And I think the things that I don't really have anything specific to talk to, but probably when shit hit the fan and so watching how people problem solve, that was probably the most useful from a takeaway kind of perspective.
Yeah, sort of like a warning sign. This will come. Be ready.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's like all stuff that you know in making short films anyway. But you know, when locations are falling through and you have to reshuffle and rewrite and, you know, do things on the fly, I think it was just a good primer for my own film.
So would you say then, based off of what you just said, would you say then like everything within your first feature you kind of experienced on your short films, just the features like a higher volume?
They were pretty different beasts, but in some ways they were really similar. I worked with the same cinematographer on my short as well as the feature, which was, brilliant to just have, you know, that long-term relationship, you know, so present on set, which meant, I mean, at the end of it, obviously a lot of things are bigger in terms of budget and, you know, cast with profile and all that kind of stuff. But in some ways you have to kind of divorce that side of your brain that's going, oh, wow, like all these things and all the pressure, blah, blah, blah. And it did feel quite like just a regular shoot, you know, everything we've been doing for a decade or whatever it was. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of specific differences. I mean, it's tricky because, and I noticed you make shorts as well. And, you know, when you're doing your own stuff, you don't really have to answer to anyone, right? Like in terms of the creative and, I mean, not on, I mean more in post and all that kind of thing, but also on set, you can kind of push the limits a little bit more because often your friends are doing you favors and they don't mind going 10 minutes over and, you know, you get them back later on their shoot. So it's all fine. But, you know, with this, it's with proper shoots, of course, there's overtime and all these kind of considerations. And it's just a little harder to bend the, I guess there's like a rigid structure to it all. And it is a bit of a machine. And, you know, my DOP and I were used to doing things quite leanly and with kind of minimal crews. And suddenly you have this kind of beast of a machine that, you know, takes time and takes more coordination. And so you can't, you know, improvise as much or do things on the fly. Like we got in trouble for sneaking off during lunch just to get some like B camera shots.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, then the first AC had to come along, and where previously on a short, you just go and do it because you felt like it.
Yeah.
So I guess those kinds of challenges were frustrating at times, but you completely understand why they exist.
Yeah. And what was the inception of this film? I mean, you said it was already in the works when you were on Upgrade, which was back, I mean, Upgrade came out in 2018, so I'm not sure what year that was shooting. So what was the inception of Relic? Where did the idea initially come from?
Yeah, I actually started writing it back in 2014. So it's been for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. We started writing it in earnest in 2015, but in 2014, I took a trip to visit my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and that particular trip was notable because it was the first time she couldn't remember who I was, and so I had a lot of feelings of, you know, guilt about that and not having gone to see her more regularly. And she also lived in this quite creepy Japanese, like, traditional house that had always really scared me as a kid because I spent most of my summers there.
Right.
And I think probably just the combination of those two things was really like the starting point for the idea. And I have a co-writer, Christian. So he and I started writing it in earnest in 2015 and developed it with an Aussie production company called Carver Films over the years with, development funding from Screen Australia, Film Victoria, that kind of thing. So we kind of, had it in shape before. I think we had a first draft before we decided to make this proof of concept called Relic. And that was made, really consciously as a calling card, essentially, as you do.
Yeah.
And it was a different story, but kind of had the same theme and tone and setting. And, that film, which my DOP Charlie shot, is an example in which, it was just all favors. Like, I just paid for that out of my own pocket. And
right.
It worked out for us because it kind of did the genre festival circuit a bit. And, it got us a bit of attention. And that was probably like when I signed with my agents. And it was a real turning point, I think.
And then what made you choose horror for this? Or what, I mean, I imagine you didn't choose, I don't feel like I ever choose a genre. It's sort of the story tells you what it is. But why do you think this went the route of horror? Because I myself, I love horror. One of the ones I'm currently developing.
Yeah.
All of them are really horror that I'm developing. And I think that's just
Amazing.
because it's, that's the easiest pathway in for, us newer filmmakers. But I have a great passion for horror. So I'm always curious to hear, especially, someone who nailed it like you did with Relic in that way, so emotional within that horror space, that I'm always curious to hear, how you view it and why that genre worked so well to tell this story.
I guess it wasn't so consciously about it being a horror. Like I've always just been a fan of horror and had previously made a couple horror, I guess psychological horror, I would say, is probably more accurate. And so it had always been on my mind. I think specifically for when I started writing Relic, I was looking to, I think I was like invited to take part in this like horror anthology because I'd made a few horror shorts before. And so I was actively writing and looking for a story to tell in this kind of anthology, and Relic is kind of what I happened upon. But I do think it works well because horror is such an amazing genre to, I guess, talk about fear. And when you're in a situation like that where a loved one's declining, I think you do experience a lot of uncertainty and fear based around, your parents' mortality, your grandparents' mortality, all that kind of stuff. And then I suppose from, in the film, the film is about, it's an exploration of Alzheimer's. So from the person suffering from the disease, there's a lot of fear involved in the experience, but also this kind of fear of like losing yourself as well. So I felt like the idea of something tying it to something supernatural or sinister gives you this ability to have the essence of that experience, but told through this really engaging and hopefully thrilling kind of ride of a story. So I also think horror is great because it allows you to feel things really strongly, if that makes sense to you. Like, there's not this risk of, I mean, there's always a risk of melodrama and overacting, I suppose. But in some ways, it's like it's acceptable to feel these really strong emotions because there's like an external kind of threat. Yeah. And for some reason, like visually, as an audience finds that more understandable, which, completely makes sense. So I'm just really drawn to externalizing our fears and kind of physicalizing them on screen, I suppose. Yeah. And that's just been a fascination of mine for a while. So it made sense to me to tell this story in that genre.
That's great. Yeah, I love the exclamation point horror can put on ideas and theme and everything. And this one was really thematically driven, which I adore. Even the ending for me was, a very thematic climax for me. And I just thought it was an effective slow burn throughout, which is another thing I love for the horror movies I love most is that sort of thing. And in my experience so far, because that's, a good part of the type of stuff I like to make as well. Those stories have been really hard to get much traction with. And I've noticed, production companies steering more toward, for instance, I similar to you, I have a feature script and we did a proof of concept for it and we took that out and everybody's like, we love it. It's not commercial enough. What else do you have?
Oh God.
Did you find that a lot with this, or what was that process like in getting this made?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think certainly, when we started shopping the script around, a lot of the feedback that we got, particularly from the American side of things, was definitely like, you just need more horror set pieces. And, it kind of almost feels downright kind of formulaic these days in a way, the idea of having to have a scare every 10 pages on the dot. And,
totally. Can we have a cold open so we know the monster up front? It's like,
exactly.
No, we can't.
And those things, I mean, the horror, conventions and tropes. And I think it's so tough. Like for us, we ended up partnering with some US producers and APs, and I think what was great about them was that they kind of backed our vision for it in terms of it, having to balance the two, the horror and the kind of drama of it. But certainly it was a constant kind of thing that, you have to push back on because, from a notes perspective, it's fine to say we need more scares, but you really do feel the writer's hand when you try and kind of shoehorn these scares when the story hasn't earned them.
Yes.
And so I know, like, even with Relic coming out, that there's going to be some backlash because it's not that type of, scare by numbers kind of film. And I'm kind of like mentally prepared myself for that. But hopefully, people can connect with it in a way that's, a little bit, I don't know, they see something else in it and it resonates on an emotional level, because that's always been my intention. And I think that's just the type of horror that I'm really drawn to, because I suppose, horror by its nature, should be scary. I don't dispute that. But I also feel like the films that really stick with you are the ones that have something to say and the ones that you connect with emotionally. So, yeah, I always pointed to J.A. Bayona's The Orphanage.
Yes. Oh, my God. Me too. Every film.
Yeah. So great. And that was a great way to kind of show people, or just point to the tone that we were kind of aiming for, because that film has this, such a huge emotional kind of gut punch at the end. And, one of the few horror films that, you cry in just as much as you're scared in. So it helps that, these kinds of films have been made before. But yeah, it's a constant struggle, man. I hear you.
Yeah, and it's like you said, there's like the typical scare horror film, which I like those too. And you got the jump scare and it's fun. But then there's the films like this one, which like I keep saying, it was so thematic, and they, you could feel the layers there, even if they aren't readily apparent. They're there, and that like begs for rewatch. And there's just a great sense of dread throughout the entire film. That's like from frame one on is just like carried. So it has, like I said, like it's just such a sense of layers that I watched it twice. So, and
amazing.
with most horror films that are like, boo, fun, I like that. I don't watch that twice. You've watched it, you watched it. And that's why I think,
totally.
Films like yours, like Relic, have far more staying power, at least with me. And it's why it's like, it's the stuff that I want to make, but I've just found such a roadblock with that, which is really interesting. But you mentioned US producers. Was that Agbo that came on?
Yeah, so we actually, first it was 9 Stories, who were great. And they came on like late development. I think we did a couple drafts with them. And I think that was the thing, that they, really understood what we were trying to do with the film and never really pushed us too far into a kind of more commercial direction, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And they were really helpful with the casting side of things as well. And then Agbo jumped on and they co-financed it with Australia. So, once they were on, it was kind of like, okay, it's happening, which, was surreal. Like I have this very kind of like hope for the best, but, expect the worst kind of approach
right.
to the industry. So the whole time I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, I'm sure it'll fall through at some point.
Yeah, Agbo, not a bad group to have involved.
No, they were great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And yeah, it's amazing how that worked out.
And with doing the drafts with the different production companies, like you were talking about, how did you find with that, with like notes getting back and forth? I'm sure there were notes that didn't resonate with you. Was there anything you learned through that process of how to navigate that better in the future, or just along the way, or how did that go for you?
I think so. I think the biggest takeaway is not to see the notes as like prescriptive, because really they're just opinions. And I think what's really been helpful for Christian and I is that, we as co-writers, you really can't be precious, and you don't, I guess you share the wins, but you also share the kind of the negative feedback as well.
Sure.
So there's a bit of a like safety in that, or at least, you're not so down on yourself when, there's things that aren't working in the story, and you can kind of come back to it and separate yourself from the work a bit, which I think is so valuable. But at the same time, we've also we worked with Carver Films in Australia, and Carver Films is 2 producers as well, and they don't always agree either. So it's kind of like the notes are there and they're helpful, but it's more about looking for trends in the notes. And so even if one person disagrees with something, if you're really passionate about it, that's probably, just stick to your guns. But then if every single person is consistently going, there's a problem here, it might not be that you need to take it out, but their note might not be addressing the problem, but there's clearly a problem there that you need to figure out what it is. So I think it's all really useful, and it just comes back to, I think in any kind of note feedback process, you just have to keep coming back to like, why are we telling the story? What is the story about? What are we trying to say? And those things can really help guide you make the right decisions moving forward. But you do have to address the note, of course. Like you have to at least kind of have that conversation.
Yeah.
And often like if you just accept like written notes, that's the worst thing you can do, because just one conversation about the note would kind of solve it for that person, and you can identify where the issue actually lies. So,
are you usually just shooting back like an email on the note, or are you usually just opting for a phone call?
Yeah, I think it was a combination, I think, because of the time difference, because 9 Stories is based in New York and Agbo's in LA.
Oh, so, wow.
and this is across the board. Yeah. This is across the board from like development to post and everything, because we were doing post across, in Australia too. So it was a lot of notes flying back and forth. But yeah, I think generally you can write like a written response to the note, but then also like chat it through, because often what can be solved so easily in the room can become this like sticking point in emails. So I think it's important to actually jump on the phone and, just hear each other out, because it's, so much can be, misconstrued or whatever by email.
Sure. And you did mention that you did write this with Christian White. What was your process together for co-writing this? Were you guys actually in the same room when you were doing it, or did you like take turns on drafts?
Yeah, it really depends. So we're co-writing another project together now called Drumwave. And yeah, it's interesting how it really just depends on what else we have on in our lives, because he is an author as well, so he kind of writes his own books too. But generally we don't write in the same room together. I would say we devise in the room, and we'll do lots of like plotting sessions and do all the cards, and we've done different things in the past, like breaking things down into 8 chapters and writing a chapter each, like alternating. Sometimes, most of the time, one of us will just do the first pass and then we'll just pass it back and forth. Recently, we did like a second draft of this new script, and that was like, I had it for a month, he had it for a month, and then it was like 2 weeks, and then a week. And then towards the end, when we started getting feedback, it was like splitting the script in half and then just working on it and then swapping. So yeah, it really just depends on what kind of work needs to be done. And sometimes, like a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, I really want to have a go at the ending. So I just did that, and then we passed it back and forth. So it's pretty loose, and yeah, it just depends on our other commitments as well.
Do one of you usually get the blinking cursor more than the other?
He's a much faster writer than me. He's a machine. Like he's pretty incredible. Like I feel like I've learned a lot from him because he's very disciplined. And I guess, I'm kind of jealous of his like full-time life, full-time writer life in a way. He lives down the coast. He's got a dog. He just goes for his walk in the morning and then he just writes all day. How wonderful. But I think we have strengths that really complement each other. Like I think he's really just stronger at structure and, just better at dialogue as well. And my strengths are probably more the thematic kind of drive of the film and the visuals and, the big kind of set pieces, whereas he's like incredible with the connective tissue. And essentially, if I was writing a film, it would just be like massive events that happened. So,
right.
Yeah.
So once you got the script in the place that you were kind of happy with, well, I mean, was there a point where you were like, yeah, this is it? Or were you kind of tweaking up until, shoot day?
No, you're like constantly tweaking. It's kind of amazing. I think we did have a pretty solid draft going into pre-production, but inevitably there's some stuff that, you run out of time for in pre. And so in some ways you have to like simplify or, it's amazing how much one careless line of big print can cause all sorts of like, art department hassles and, can be really expensive.
Right.
Yeah, it's good to have that awareness going into writing this new film, just to know what is going to cause those issues. And I think there was like one scene that I ended up rewriting just dialogue wise, because just after having conversations with the actors and, really chatting them through and interrogating them, which I think is a good thing, really. So, I mean, there wasn't anything too major. I think the ending, we had to simplify a little bit, but not in a way that really affects the story. They're just added beats that we, just thought, oh, do we need them? Are we just going to cut them, in the editing room? So
right. And then once you had to sort of put on your director hat, rather, what was your prep for this? Do you board? Do you shot list?
Yeah, I interestingly, I mean, definitely storyboard for the bigger kind of action sequences because there's a bit of stunts in the film. Or same with like the prosthetics, like the big scenes that we had to plan. Anything that was really tricky technically, we boarded. I tend to do my own little like sketches, but they're very crude and just for me. Like I would never circulate them. And my DP and I definitely would just shot list, or at least have like a tentative kind of thing prior in pre-production, and then things inevitably kind of move around. And I have to say, like, I'm pretty methodical in my prep, particularly for everything I've done like short form wise, but I found on the feature that we were constantly throwing away the blueprint, or at least like partially throwing it away, because things just inevitably kept shifting, which was, a little bit scary for me initially, but I think over time you get more used to that feeling of free falling a little bit and
right.
Learn to trust your instincts a little bit more. Like I definitely wouldn't say we were winging it, but there were definitely moments when I was like, oh, this is not how I saw this going, but still like pushing through and being okay with it. I think, I think that was pretty, I would say it's like regular stuff, like running out of time and having to combine shots and all that kind of thing. And whatever it was, locations falling through, props not being quite right, all the fun logistical issues you come across and have to creatively problem solve.
How many days did you guys shoot for?
We actually had a pretty generous shoot, it seems, like compared to a lot of American indies. Like it was 6 weeks. So
that's great.
30 days.
Yeah.
But we also do 10-hour days in Australia. So you do lose a bit of time.
A little bit of a trade-off there, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it was 2 2 weeks on a soundstage, a studio, and then 4 weeks on location.
For the soundstage, so was the house built or was the house practical?
Yeah, it was a combination of 3 different, I guess, 2 houses and 1 basically set build. One house was the exterior mainly, 1 was the interior, and then the soundstage we built the labyrinth as well as some of the bedrooms, and we had to rebuild some of the hallways from the house interior so it all connected. Yeah, it was a bit of a puzzle in a good way. Like it was challenging from a coverage point of view because there'd be some scenes where it'd just be on a completely different set, so you have to kind of
we were here and now we're there, and so that would be there.
Exactly, which is a pain because you want to be able to just follow the actors through the spaces sometimes, but it was just the house had to be so specific, and because we had to destroy parts of it, it was like unavoidable. Yeah.
Was there one that you preferred between the practical and because I've never shot in studio before. I've only ever shot on location. Did you prefer studio or did you prefer like actually there on location?
Look, I say studio, but to be honest, in Melbourne at the time, there was this massive Chinese blockbuster shooting, and their dates clashed with ours, and so we had to shoot in this warehouse in the west of Melbourne.
Gotcha.
And it was fine, like it was massive, but it was just not soundproofed. And there was one particular scene where the actors were doing such a beautiful job, and it was just raining, and we had to hold, and all kinds of nightmares like that. And it was in this really industrial area, so you'd hear all these tradies or like work people out the back kind of unloading their trucks, and it's just
oh my god,
bit of a nightmare. But apart from that, like I definitely see the value in shooting in studio and how easy it is for everyone, the crews and everyone kind of can relax a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something kind of magical about being away together because we had like a week on the road where we were out in like country Victoria, and it's really nice just to be with your team and just a sense of like you're on a journey together. And I don't know, I guess it like harkens back to the whole like Lord of the Rings box set DVDs, and you're like, this is my team and this is amazing. But it's also really tough being out in the elements as well. Like it wasn't too cold when we shot, it was probably like early spring, but yeah, there are challenges to just being outside as well. So at the end of it all, you kind of feel like it's nice to just be in the studio. And also when you're working in like houses, inevitably it's like cramped as hell, and there's just not enough space for everyone, and you're kind of all on top of each other. So I guess it's like there's pros and cons to both.
Sure. Yeah. I love the idea of building something out to shoot in the way you want to shoot it,
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Your cast was amazing. How did that come about? Was that like all first choice stuff or?
Yeah, you have all these like kind of, we did have a lot of creative conversations about what pairings of actors work, because obviously as a family, they have to look vaguely similar. And so if you went with one actor, you couldn't have the other. There's also considerations with the Aussie funding, you can only have one international lead actor. So that was also like a bit of a puzzle piece too. So we basically like assembled all of the, actors that we felt were like within the range of what we wanted. And yeah, it was amazing when we kind of settled on Emily. It was like this real aha moment. And yeah, I think Robin as well, we had always had in mind too, because she, I know she's not as well known in the States, but in Australia, she's like considered like a theatre kind of great, and she had, she's directed and she's run the Sydney Theatre Company, and yeah, she's just like a force, and she does a lot of like TV comedy as well, so I think we always had our eye on her too. And then Bella as well, I'd always been a fan of her, and I met all 3 of them like individually in the States, and we all just really clicked, and they seemed to really kind of understand what I was trying to do with the script. Like we never really talked about it as a horror film, which I think was important from like a performance perspective. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, and speaking of the performances, how did you find working with each one of them? Did you find your relationship as a director with them and their performance very different between them, or sort of your process with working them with each similar?
Yeah, I guess there's definitely some subtle differences between all three. I mean, I think they were all incredibly giving and trusting from the get-go. Like, I think that was probably my biggest fear coming into it, because, you know, talking to heads of department is pretty similar, but really having to step up and, you know, work with, I guess, actors with profile. I think that's kind of the biggest difference in doing a feature, I would say. But I was pretty just open with them, and a lot of the prep work that we did was just in talking about our lives, and it wasn't dissimilar to like co-writing in a sense. You know, you're trying to create something together and collaborate and trying to find common ground in your experiences that interest both of you and kind of speak to that. And so that when you jump on set, you have this kind of shorthand about how to talk about that kind of stuff. So that was really helpful. I mean, they all had to go through such different things too. I think, you know, Bella in particular had to be trapped by herself in the film for a long time. And so for her, sometimes it was just about needing space too, and, you know, just wanting to kind of be alone. And in that, it was more about like creating an atmosphere that in which she could do that. Yeah, like she'd often go off and just listen to music prior to a take, that kind of thing. With Robin, I felt like she was great. Like, we did a lot of prep work with visiting nursing homes. Like, she actually went and sat in with some dementia ward patients a few times. But I think that stuff was kind of, in the end, it ended up being a little bit peripheral, in the sense that she really kind of handed the reins over to me and was like, you know, it's not like she's going to come at this from an outside in kind of perspective. She needs to come at it inside out. So she needed to kind of take it moment by moment. And so it was really about just kind of creating the context for each moment, as opposed to, from her perspective, trying to see the character as a whole. Because I think there's such a challenge in you know, performing a character who's undergoing such a transformation, and some of her behavior can look very like irrational. But I just always tried to find like some, I guess, trying to attach her behavior to some kind of motivation that made sense for the character in that time, even if it didn't to the other characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you know, she really does have to play so many different facets of Edna throughout the film. So, and that's something I feel like I've observed in my reading. I've seen with people with Alzheimer's that, you know, often their behaviors that are aggressive or violent or irrational are usually tied to some, you know, external cue or reason. And it might not be obvious and it might not be the right response, but they're acting that way for, you know, it's being motivated by something. So for us, it was just trying to find that motivation in the scene.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because it always felt very grounded and in the moment. So that it definitely appeared to have worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing would be if she was like playing a very obvious kind of caricature of someone going through that experience. So yeah, it was always about like what is in this, like, what is she seeing? What's causing that annoyance? What's the last slight that character has experience from the other characters, whatever it was.
Yeah. And was there anything that, I mean, I'm sure it was like a whirlwind of things, but was there anything that either you learned along the way or something that you wish you could go back to, you know, you before you shot this thing, to give a bit of advice about working with the performers? Because, you know, like you said, it's same for me. One of my biggest like stresses is the idea of working with, you know, someone with, like you said, a little bit of a bigger portfolio, you know? So is there any like bit of advice that you would give for somebody who's maybe about to do that for the first time, or even you would say to, you know, you in the past?
Yeah, I mean, probably that you don't need to feel, and this probably goes across the board even for, you know, anything in the film, is like, you don't need to feel like you have all the answers all the time. Like you have to be able to see the film, but sometimes the answer to every question doesn't have to be apparent to you, and it's okay to ask people what they think as well. And ultimately they're there to help you, you know, and you've hired them for a reason, because they've got great ideas, and it's more for you to keep sight of like the overall picture and to decide and curate these options that people are presenting you with. And, you know, you obviously need to have ideas as well, but you can lean on people sometimes too. So I think I didn't experience it too much. I don't know if I just got lucky with a really like collaborative team or whatever, but I know that with other first-time directors that, people have like shared experiences with me, and they've said that like sometimes that they feel like they need to have every answer and they need to know everything, and so they clam up, and that's worse because you're losing time.
Yeah.
And and it's not good for your mental health because you kind of hold the weight of the world on your shoulders and the whole film.
Yeah, stress on top of stress.
You can delegate. Yeah. It's like, I know we need to get here, but I'm not sure how to do that. I don't know what the best way is. What do you think? Can you get back to me? Like, it's just managing people. And I think the danger, of course, is not letting someone else's idea, which is totally well-intentioned, kind of steer you off course. I think that can be dangerous as well. But
yeah,
I guess that's the job, is the curation of the decisions and, what path you're going down. But yeah, I would say that would be my biggest takeaway for a first-timer.
That's great advice. And were you able to, like you're talking about those decisions, were you able to see those decisions a little bit as you were going through the edit, or were you guys not editing at all during production?
Yeah, we were editing throughout production as well, like assemblies and stuff. There were definitely some things we could kind of see we were missing. Nothing huge, I would say, but, like, we need more connective, like, exterior shots or something like that, that kind of thing. Yeah, there wasn't anything. Like, we actually did a day of pickups in LA and a day of pickups in Melbourne to clarify some of the mythology, which I think is a common issue for horror that you really get tripped up on.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing. I think the hardest thing for horror is like the endings and the mythology and executing that in a way that's not expositional and clunky.
100%. That's like all the notes I get on my scripts is those two things.
Yeah. So I would say like overshoot the hell out of your expositional mythology scenes and try and strip it back in the edit, because it's worse if you try and be too subtle and you have to go back and pick it up. Because I feel like that's probably what happened to me, that I was really conscious of kind of beating the audience over the head with the mythology, and then in the end it was like, we don't understand what's happening. So yeah.
So were those reshoots then, or were those things that you found while you were shooting because you were editing while you were shooting?
No, they were like additional kind of footage that we wrote to clarify some stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha. Were there other things that you found like in the edit while you were in post where it's like, because this happens to me on every short that I ever do, ever. Mm-hmm. It's like you get to a moment and the moment's just not working how you thought it was going to work. So you have to, get creative with the edit to kind of, repiece it to work a little bit differently to get it to work. Or, I have friends who've done, the short films that I've done, because like you said, it's a lot of favors and whatnot. So like additional ADR after the fact is pretty much never an option, especially because it's like all remote pretty much.
Right.
But was there moments of like ADR just to clarify something, or different things where you had to move the puzzle pieces around?
Yeah, totally. And that again relates to the mythology thing I was talking about earlier, that there was a little bit of ADR that we had to nudge in there to make things clearer, which kind of breaks your heart a bit, because it just feels so kind of cheap in a way.
Yeah. I totally
but you appreciate that, I think you're so conscious of, or at least I am, of wanting to, I guess, not spoon feed audiences, but also not wanting to alienate them as well. And I totally get that there is a constant balance between, trying to make it kind of comprehensible and trying to, I guess, make it true to what you set out for it to be. So, I don't think there were massive sacrifices or anything, but certainly there's stuff in the film that I'm like, oof, would not have chosen to do it that way.
Well, I didn't notice any of them. If that's helpful at all. But did you find those through test screenings, or did you just find those through producer notes and whatnot?
No, we didn't do any test screenings, which was fine by me. But it was such a a shock to do the whole Sundance screening. So to go from 15 people max in the room to 500.
Yeah. Oh man, that must have been nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So instead we did, the producers had their trusted group of I guess just an inner circle of people that they would show the film to for feedback. And in Australia, because we had the funding bodies backing us, we did screenings for them as well, and our domestic distributor, that kind of thing. So there was probably 10 people in the room. And we'd rotate it sometimes with some kind of, I guess, just friends that we trusted as well. So maybe probably 40 to 50 people were watching the film in the making of it.
That's awesome. And then the music was fantastic in the film as well, which I love. Your composer, 30 Days of Night. I love that soundtrack. I played that thing on repeat nonstop when it came out. How'd that connection come about?
Yeah, I actually had been a fan of his music from, I think it was Hannibal, that I really enjoyed.
Yes.
And it has such a striking non-orchestral, well, it's orchestral, but it's not, I guess it's non-traditional.
Yeah.
So I really was just kind of fascinated by, his approach to music. I knew he was a massive Takemitsu fan as well. So it's a Japanese composer from the new wave films of the 60s. And so he and I met up in LA, and he was just really, he's the most affable, open person as well. And he's got this incredible little sound recording studio where he makes instruments and just, finds all manner of strange objects to make these kind of bizarre noises. And we just had so much fun talking about the film. And he and the sound designer, Rob McKenzie, worked together really closely. And so they kind of amassed this library of sounds that each of them recorded to work from. And then so when it came to it, the work was really closely aligned just because they were building from the same library. It's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's amazing. And it worked so well with the film, just how tonal it was. But what's next for you? You mentioned Drumwave, your short film that you're now extending out into a feature?
So Drumwave's a Japanese folk horror. And we're in the second draft. Relatively early stages on that. But it's been a lot of fun to just embrace something new. Because it can take a while, Relic, we wrote that for probably 4 years or 3 years before we, made it.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a couple other projects as well, and they're all within the horror kind of subgenre.
Awesome. Are you writing any on your own, or are you co-writing them all?
I've started writing them on my own, but that's not to say they weren't. I might find a co-writer further down the track. I'm not too sure yet. So
Drumwave is what you have coming up next, and definitely going to be looking forward to that. I'm really excited to see what you do next. I loved Relic, and I can't wait to see Drumwave as well. So I'm just excited to follow your career and what you got coming. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was really fun to chat. And that's it for today. Huge thank you to Natalie for taking the time to chat with us. And of course, you can find more from Natalie, including links of where you can follow her online by going to filmriot.com/podcast. Find the episode page for this episode, and we'll have all of that in there for you. Plus, we have an all new website design that just went up. So definitely go and check that out as well. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. The new podcast area, I think, looks very sexy, and we're getting our blog started as well. So definitely check that out there. Also, and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you guys think about the look of the new site. We tried to go very clean and simple, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And of course, you can send that to me at twitter.com/Ryan_Connolly. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.